Catalonia voted on independence from Spain recently, and the response from the government of Spain was wild. Take a look.
De repente han cargado de una manera salvaje. Y nada, seguiremos luchando por hoy.
Abuelos, niños, mujeres, todos llorando, todos sufriendo. ¿Y por qué? Solo por querer votar, por querer democracia, por querer ser una persona normal, con derechos humanos, ¿sabes?
L'ús injustificat, irracional i irresponsable de la violència per part de l'estat espanyol no només no atura el desig dels catalans de poder votar pacíficament, democràticament,
Okay, so that appears to me to be not even a question as to what was happening. There were police who were undoubtedly assaulting peaceful protesters. Just no hint of provocation on the part of the protesters, just the police assaulting them. They broke into polling places and stole the ballot boxes and basically said, look, we're not recognizing your referendum. By the way, apparently the results of the referendum are 90% in favor of independence. So this is a wild situation. Now, we recently spoke about this in the context of Kurdistan. For those of you who haven't seen my segment on that, I recommend go taking a look at that. So Catalonia is very economically, it's a very economically productive region. There's a lot of manufacturing that goes on there. And they are net taxpayers to the government in Spain, and they're effectively subsidizing poorer regions of Spain. So Spain, you know, they're not interested in Catalonia saying, hey, we want independence, because they're a very, you know, integral part of the tax base, necessary part of the tax base in the eyes of the Spanish government. And they're against Catalonia having independence. So they also have their own language. And there were some language issues where for a while it was banned, the language, and then it was brought back and allowed, but then now Catalonia wants it, you know, getting basically equal treatment with Spanish, and the Spanish government says, no, you're not going to get equal treatment with your language, and then they took that as disrespect, and that fueled the independence movement even more. But I think the real question that Spain is concerned about is... It's a similar question with Kurdistan, is if Catalonia gets independence, well then what happens to the Basque state, for example? They've always wanted independence. Does the Basque state get their own country now? And then is there going to be a gradual progression that's basically the unraveling of the order and changing of the world map dramatically? And then also what happens when you have all these tiny independent countries, and, you know, if you do it all throughout Europe and you're bordering Russia, what's going to happen? You used to have states that were unified and together and somewhat strong, and then now when you become fractionalized and independent, and you're not unified, well, then that opens the door for a giant powerhouse that is unified like Russia to sweep in and say, ours. So, and look, that's not, this is all theoretical here that I'm talking about, and these are concerns that when you look at the geopolitical scene and you can extrapolate and look down the road and think, hey, what can happen in these scenarios? So I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not saying that's likely to happen. I'm just saying these are the things that, people who are more for unity are concerned about in the long run. But yet, in my mind, yes, this is a similar thing like with Kurdistan. I'm under no illusions about, how feasible this is and the difficulties that arise as a result of it. That in Kurdistan, okay, if you have an independent Kurdistan in Iraq, well, then you're going to have the Kurds in Iran, you're going to have the Kurds in Syria, you're going to have the Kurds in Turkey go, okay, we want to be part of the independent Kurdistan state. And so the governments of those countries are like, no, we're not, there is going to be no independent Kurdistan, because then you got to redraw the maps and it's this issue. And so that's the problem there. The problem here is the unraveling of Spain, where if Catalonia gets their own country, then Basque's going to want their own country, and then, is Spain gone in however many years? And so I understand all the downsides of it, and I have no illusions as to whether or not it'll be a smooth process. It won't be in either instance, and it'll be a very messy process, and perhaps will create more problems than solve problems. But look, as a general rule, yes, people should be free to make that own decision about, if they want to have their own country or not, if they want independence or not. And I've even said this, and I've been criticized for it in terms of the U.S. I think everything should be exhausted in terms of trying to make it work as you're unified. But yes, if at the end of the day, decades down the road, the U.S. government is still hopelessly corrupt and not representing the will of the people, and California goes, we want out of this bitch, and they have a referendum, yes, it probably should be respected. Same with Texas. You try to exhaust everything to make it work as in a unified sense, and then if it doesn't work, I don't see the argument of the centralized government having a right to just force everybody else to be part of the country they don't want to be a part of. Now, again, I always add the caveat when I talk about this. I do think the Civil War in the U.S. is an exception, because they weren't just saying, hey, we want independence from the U.S. They were saying we want it because we want to own human beings and keep them as slaves. So that, I think, was a just war, because it wasn't just about, hey, you're going to remain part of the U.S. It was also about, and we're going to free the fucking slaves. So I think that's an exception where it was right to fight that war and almost force them to stay, because you are forcing them to not own human beings. But in a case where there's not slavery as a main issue involved in it, yes, I think they should have the right to make that decision. And in the long run, they may determine, hey, it was a bad idea and we shouldn't have gotten independence. But they should have that right. They should have that ability. And damn, the Spanish government is making it super easy to say, oh, wow, who's the bad people in this situation? And by the way, that doesn't always mean, here's another point, that doesn't always mean that, the people who are fighting for the independence are left-wingers. It doesn't mean that they're by definition left-wingers and by definition going to push for a better system in their independent state than they would have in the unified state. It's easy to imagine right-wing nationalists saying, hey, we want independence. In Texas, it wouldn't be liberals or progressives who say, we want an independent Texas. It would be right-wingers who say, we want a Texas state and we want to, create a fucking free market hub and make it more right-wing. So, and again, I understand that it's not always going to be the left-wingers who are pushing for it. And in the case of Catalonia, I don't even know if it is the left-wingers who are pushing for independence. But I'm just saying that as a general principle, if all else fails and people want their own state, okay, I don't see any reason or argument against that other than it'll be really sloppy and really inconvenient and really messy, and people might eventually say it was a bad idea. But ultimately, that's not my decision to make. That's the decision to make of the people of Catalonia, and they seem to have spoken pretty clearly. Last point I'll make on this is, apparently the polls prior to this vote said, hey, like 41% of people or 45% of people in Catalonia favored independence. And then the vote itself said 90% favored independence. So here's my takeaway from that. Either the election was rigged or the polls were rigged. It has to be one or the other. So I don't know. Is it only that 41% or 45% of people want independence, or is it that 90% of people wanted independence? and the polls were rigged? Or is it that the election is rigged and the polls weren't rigged? There's some fuckery going on in one of those, whether it's the poll or the election, so it's kind of hard to determine here. And the ruling party also, they're claiming a mandate to have this referendum, but they only got elected with 48% of the vote. So they have a majority of the government there, but they only got elected with 48% of the vote, which is one of the reasons why people who are for staying in Spain are saying, whoa, this isn't, you only got elected with 48% of the vote. You don't have a mandate on this. So it's a little more complicated and a little more messy than people would have you believe. But again, either way, at the end of the day, my take is the same. With no illusions, I say, if all else fails, you should have the right to go ahead and, develop your own independent state. And in the long run, you may figure out, hey, that was a bad idea, or it might be a good idea, but it's really not my call. It's the call of the people there. And as long as everything is democratically, approved, then it is what it is.